Hey folks, welcome back to Dominique Does Life. It's your girl Dominique back here with you. Whether you're listening in on iHeartRadio, whether you're listening in on Spotify, Spreaker, or some other iteration, some other form of a podcasting app, I appreciate you listening in, and I want to thank you in advance right now for being here to hold space for this discussion. Now, briefly, I just want to put out my standard PSA, guys. As you know me. I'm going to tell you what kind of a discussion we're going to have. And yes, that is going to center around us having a discussion that is respectful, because we do not tolerate bullying, trolling, or nonsense here. We don't put up with no shenanigans around here, okay? Now, you can weigh in live with a respectful and pertinent question, comment, or just a running conversation in the chat section of the free Spreaker app. So I encourage you to do that if you have something constructive to say. If, on the other hand, you do not have something constructive to say, you run the risk of being made to look a fool. I mean, by your own actions, and then, of course, by being utterly ratioed by me and by any other kind people who are listening in who might take issue with what you've said because it's hateful. And of course, when you speak out and you make yourself look like a jerk, you are showing people who you are. And you know what? It'll be preserved on the interwebs forever and ever and ever. So you really aren't going to have to answer so much to me as you are to anybody else who's read your ignorant comment. So keep that in mind, as per usual. And you know what? Let's assume that everybody is going to be avoid being disrespectful and be as kind as possible. And let's get right into the discussion. So we're going to be unpacking the Invisible Knapsack today. Okay, and I'm bringing this episode up today. I know we've talked about this issue before, and that I've written about it on DominiqueDoesLife.com on the blog portion of this content machine, cranking out the content here. I have written about this, fairly extensively on my blog, so feel free to check it out there at www.DominiqueDoesLife.com. But it occurred to me that I haven't particularly addressed this paper, this sort of prospectus on privilege. And I felt like I would be remiss if I didn't do so. And so here we are today. Right here, right now. So, first off, before I get into this, I'm not going to go absolutely nuts with a background story on this, but I will say that unfortunately, in the county that I live in, McHenry County in Illinois, I'm right on the border of several counties, and unfortunately I am on sort of the racist, sexist, bigoted side. Not that there's not bigotry everywhere, but McHenry County has some issues with that we need to face and address so that we can move forward together. And I have noticed that in a particular McHenry County social media group, that several Black and brown members over the past few weeks have either flat out had their posts taken down, and these posts have actually centered around racist, hateful, bigoted things that have happened to them in McHenry County. And it's literally a chat group. So what, we're allowed to chat about anything that doesn't make you uncomfortable as a white person? Is that it? So anyhow, this is something that I pointed out specifically in the group last night. And I was expecting trolling and for heads to explode and Proud Boys to come marching out, and they did. They didn't disappoint. But, I guess what I want to say before I begin is that when we silence other people's voices, we're silencing ourselves. we're hurting our own kids, our grandkids, we're hurting ourselves, we're hurting the relationship that we have with ourselves. And frankly, guys, let's be real, we're hurting the relationship that we have with God or the universe or our higher selves or whatever your belief system may be. You are hurting yourself in that relationship. I believe that bigotry and that racism and that acts of hate and bias and bigotry harm the soul. I really do. And bigotry is within all of us, but we've got to talk about this a little bit more openly here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unpack the Invisible Knapsack for you. For me, this piece, White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack by Peggy McIntosh, is absolutely groundbreaking. It has given me, as somebody of mixed ethnicity who does have white ancestry as well as non-white ancestry, okay, and that's something I've been afraid to admit, folks. It has, especially, since the presidential election, and it's like, I always was like, you know what, I'm just going to keep my head down. I'm not going to mention anything. Like, people can think what they want. And now I'm like, you know what? No, forget that. I am not going to keep my head down. If people can't respect me when they know who I am, then we already have a problem. Okay? That's what's up. If you can't respect me when you know who I am, where I'm from, and what I'm about fully, whether you're a friend, family member, acquaintance, whether you're a colleague, whether you're a client, then that's going to be a problem. And it's going to be a problem for you a hell of a lot more than it's going to be a problem for me. Let me tell you that up front. But being able to relate to white privilege is something I can do because I can kind of like pass between all of those worlds of the different ethnicities that make up me, who I am, Dominique, as a person. Whatever the hell that means, right? They make me up, and they all touch on a different aspect of me, my various ethnicities and ethnic backgrounds. And, I feel that I do have a light skin privilege, a major, major, major light skin privilege. I do meet up with colorism now and again, but more sort of from white people and from like really Afrocentric sort of Hotep type black people, unfortunately. And it's sort of like, how dare you try to co-opt the black experience? And it's like, I'm not co-opting it, I'm living it though. So I'm not stealing it from you. I'm just having my own experience. That's all. Like, you can have yours and I'll have mine. I can't change who I am. I'm not trying to change who I am. I'm going to live who I am, right? So, but being part white, excuse me, and being somebody who, because of where I live, pertinent and germane to the conversation here, right? When I brought that up before, I knew I was going to touch on it again now. So stay with me. So partially because of where I live, I need to be able to interact with white people in a meaningful way. And I need to be able to have conversations with them which are productive, respectful, and relevant, and mutually beneficial. And this piece, White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack by Peggy McIntosh, which was written around 34 years ago, I want to say. So really revolutionary stuff for her contemporaries in her period of time when she was sort of at her zenith, right, in the psychology field and in sociology and philosophy. But this piece that was written in the 80s by Peggy McIntosh, White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. Yes, I'm saying that title over and over again because I want you guys to go out there and Google it and find it for yourself, okay? It has allowed me to really be able to relate with, again, my white friends, colleagues, neighbors, clients, doctors, because God forbid there be a doctor who's not white, right? Honestly, there are many non-white doctors, but it's hard as a woman and a mixed person and somebody from the LGBTQI side of things to sort of get people to look at you in the healthcare industry and take your health seriously, right? So this has helped me with that. This has helped me to interact with people who genuinely maybe have good hearts, maybe they believe they're not racist, maybe they're very hurt, angry, and upset when things are mentioned that challenge their privilege because they don't understand it. They don't believe they have it. Like, they're like, hey, I've worked hard, I've struggled, what, my experience doesn't matter? It's like, no, your experience matters. It just doesn't matter more than the experiences of Black and brown people, which, let's be honest, is something that we've all been taught subtly and totally upfront as well, in a totally bold and bald-faced way as we have all moved through life. Like, we've all been taught this, haven't we? If we're honest with ourselves. So without further ado, I'm going to actually just read you the piece by Peggy McIntosh. I'm not judging you, folks. I need you to understand that. But I am bringing up questions that I hope you'll ask and answer for yourself. Okay? That's all. I literally just want to share a perspective with you, and I hope that you will choose to see it and hear it for what it is. And if you don't, well, that's really unfortunate, but it's unlikely to directly affect or impact me. It's most likely to directly affect and impact you. Again, your heart, your soul, your life, your loved ones, your peace of mind. So I am actually doing this for you just as much as I'm doing it for me. So, white privilege. Unpacking the invisible knapsack. You just keep track of which of these items on the checklist apply or have applied to you. You don't have to report to me, but please be honest with yourself. So, says Peggy McIntosh, I was taught to see racism only in individual acts of meanness, not in invisible systems conferring dominance on my group. Again, her group meaning white people. Daily effects of white privilege. I decided to try to work on myself, at least by identifying some of the daily effects of white privilege in my life. I have chosen those conditions that I think in my case attach somewhat more to skin color privilege than to class, religion, ethnic status, or geographic location. Though, of course, all of these other factors are intricately intertwined. As far as I can tell, my African American coworkers, friends, and acquaintances with whom I come into daily or frequent contact in this particular time, place, and time of work cannot count on most of these conditions. And I'm going to interject really quickly, folks, and just say that while this was true back then in the 80s, it's still true today. It's still just as true today. So, number one, and again, you just answer this for yourself. Does it apply to you? Does it not apply to you? And be culpable to you, not me, not anyone else. If I can, I can if I wish to be in the company of people. Okay, I don't like how this is worded. I can if I wish to arrange it, we'll say, to be in the company of people of my race most of the time. So if you wish to arrange it, if you don't want to be around those pesky Black and brown people, you can arrange to be around people who look like you and represent you racially, ethnically speaking. Number two. So is that true for you or is it not true for you? Something to answer for yourself. Number two, I can avoid spending time with people whom I was trained to mistrust and who have learned to mistrust me or people like me. Number three, if I should need to move, like move house, if I should need to move, I can be pretty sure of renting or purchasing housing in an area which I can afford and in which I would want to live. Number four, I can be pretty sure that my neighbors in such locations will be either neutral or even pleasant to me. Number 5, I can go shopping alone most of the time, pretty well assured that I will not be followed or harassed. And again, I'm just throwing this in there, but she's talking about being followed or harassed in store, or like when you leave the store, having people say, oh my gosh, you must have been stealing things, or what have you. If you're not familiar with that trope, please feel free to go to YouTube, open up the search bar, and search shopping while black. Okay, you'll see what I mean. Number 6, I can turn on the television or open to the front page of the paper and see people of my race widely represented. Number 7, when I am told about our national heritage or about quote-unquote civilization, I am shown that people of my color made it what it is. And I would even go a little further than that, folks, and I would say I am shown pictures of people either drawn or taken, physically, people being photographed at the time, preserved in history books that reflect people who look like me. In other words, I'm seeing pictures of white people in the history books, and white people being made to look like the victors and what have you. And, I'm seeing that people who look like me have shaped this world, right? That's what she's talking about. Number 8, I can be sure that my children will be given curricular materials that testify to the existence of their race. Number 9, if I want to, I can be pretty sure of finding a publisher for this very piece of writing on white privilege. Number 10, I can be pretty sure of having my voice heard in a group in which I am the only member of my race. So let's say you're in a room full of black or brown people. Your voice is still likely to be heard, right? I mean, let's be honest with ourselves here. 9 times out of 10, probably, in my case, I would even say, yeah, that applies to me. Number 11, I can be casual about whether or not to listen to another person's voice in a group in which he or she is the only member of his or her race. So I don't really have to listen to other people's experiences. If I don't want to, I could just go ahead and continue living my reality. I don't have to share a reality with these people. They're not like me. But I'm not bigoted, I'm not biased, I'm not racist. Number 12, I can go into a music shop and count on finding the music of my race represented. Into a supermarket and find the staple foods which fit my cultural traditions. Into a hairdresser's shop and find someone who can cut my hair. Number 13, whether I use checks, credit cards, or cash, I can count on my skin color not to work against the appearance of financial reliability on my behalf. Excuse me for one moment. I did not want to cough into the microphone. Okay, my autoimmune illnesses have really been acting up in such a fun and exciting way the last few days, and so if you notice any pauses, I'm simply trying to not cough in your ear. I'm a consummate professional that way. Okay. Number 14, I can arrange to protect my children most of the time from people who might not like them. Number 15, I do not have to educate my child to be aware of systemic racism for their own daily protection. And again, I would expound on that. I would say I do not have to educate my child that if they come in contact with a police officer, to keep their hands on the steering wheel, to not move, to tell them, officer, I have nothing that could hurt you, me, or anyone else on my person or near me. You don't have to teach your children to avoid the police lest you be shot, right? It's a pretty stark difference between the white reality and the black and brown and mixed realities. Number 16, I can be pretty sure that my children's teachers and employers will tolerate them if they fit school and workplace norms. My chief worries about them do not concern other people's attitudes toward their race. I can talk with my mouth full, number 17, and not have people put this down to my color. Number 18, I can swear or dress in secondhand clothes or not answer letters. And again, today it would be like texts, emails, calls, messages, what have you, without having people attribute these choices to the bad morals, the poverty, or the illiteracy of my race. Number 19, I can speak in public to a powerful male group without putting my race on trial. Well, that touches on sexism and racism. Number 20, I can do well in a challenging situation without being called a credit to my race. Number 21, I am never asked to speak for all the people of my racial group. Number 22, I can remain oblivious of the language and customs of persons of color who constitute the world's majority without feeling in my culture any penalty for such oblivion. So are other white people going to call me out on not listening to black or brown people? Probably not. We're living separate realities, basically. Number 23, I can criticize our government and talk about how much I fear its policies and behavior without being seen as a cultural outsider. Number 24, I can be pretty sure that if I ask to talk to, quote-unquote, the person in charge, I will be faced with a person of my race. Number 25, if a traffic cop pulls me over or the IRS audits my tax return, I can be sure I haven't been singled out because of my race. Number 26, I can easily buy posters, postcards, picture books, greeting cards, dolls, toys, and children's magazines featuring people of my race. I can go home, says number 27, from most meetings of organizations I belong to, feeling somewhat tied in rather than isolated, out of place, outnumbered, unheard, held at a distance, or feared. And I would go on to add ridiculed or even unsafe. Number 28, I can be pretty sure that an argument with a colleague of another race is more likely to jeopardize his or her chances for advancement than to jeopardize mine. Number 29, I can be pretty sure that if I argue for the promotion of a person of another race or a program centering on race, this is not likely to cost me heavily within my present setting, even if my colleagues disagree with me. Number 30, if I declare there's a racial issue at hand or there isn't a racial issue at hand, I'm needing to zoom in here. If I declare there is a racial issue at hand or there isn't a racial issue at hand, my race will lend me more credibility for either position than a person of color will have. Number 31, I can choose to ignore developments in minority writing and minority activist programs or disparage them or learn from them, but in any case, I can find ways to be more or less protected from negative consequences of any of these choices. My culture, says number 32, gives me little fear about ignoring the perspectives and powers of people of other races. Number 33, I am not made acutely aware that my shape, bearing, or body odor will be taken as a reflection on my race. And I would go on to add style of dress, choices in makeup, choices in how we do our hair. So it's not going to reflect on your race. People are going to look at you as an individual, correct? If that feels true for you, then you can check another item off of that checklist. Number 34, I can worry about racism without being seen as self-interested or self-seeking. Number 35, I can take a job with an affirmative action employer without having my coworkers on the job suspect that I got it because of my race. Number 36. If my day, week, or year is going badly, I need not ask of each negative episode or situation whether it had racial overtones. Number 37. I can be pretty sure of finding people who would be willing to talk with me and advise me about my next steps professionally. Number 38. I can think over many options, social, political, imaginative, or professional, without asking whether a person of my race would be accepted or allowed to do what I want to do. Number 39. I can be late to a meeting without having the lateness reflect on my race. Number 40. I can choose public accommodation without fear that people of my race cannot get in or will be mistreated in the places I have chosen. So you can pretty much travel anywhere, go where you want, do what you need to do, at least without the fear that if something does happen, it will be based on your race. It might be based on any number of other things that you do or don't do, things about you, characteristics, but it's not based on your race. Do you feel me on that? Number 41, I can be sure that if I need legal or medical help, my race will not work against me. Number 42, I can arrange my activities so that I will never have to experience feelings of rejection owing to my race. Number 43, if I have low credibility as a leader, I can be sure that my race is not the problem. Number 44, I can easily find academic courses and institutions which give attention only to people of my race. I think a good example of that would be a history department in a school. Like, there's history and then there's African history. There's history and then there's black history. There's history and then there's women's history. It's literally all the same history. And while all parts should be equally represented and celebrated, we should really look at the accomplishments of women, black people, brown people, LGBTQI plus folks, just as much as we look at straight white people's accomplishments and men's accomplishments, right? Do you feel me? That's kind of what's being said. Okay. Number 45. I can expect figurative language and imagery in all of the arts to testify to experiences of my race. So walk into a museum. Do you see a lot of African art there? I mean, it's not an African museum, I'm assuming. It's just a regular museum. Maybe it's even the Louvre. Maybe it's the Art Institute here in Chicago. Are you going to look around and tend to see more people that represent your color, your race, your ethnicity? I would even go so far as to say your gender, your sex, your socioeconomic status. I would say that if you can answer yes to that, you're probably being pretty honest. And that you're probably white, okay? Number 46. I can choose blemish cover or bandages in flesh color and have them more or less match my skin. So if I get a Band-Aid, I put it on, is it going to match my skin tone more or less? If it does, again, it's just another very small, well, not even that small really, but probably to white people it seems small. It's a small, quote-unquote, reflection of the norm having been centered around white people's experiences, right? Okay. Number 47. I can travel alone or with my spouse without expecting embarrassment or hostility in those who deal with us. And I think that would go for, people of color, women, LGBTQI plus folks, right? I think that would really cover a lot of ground there. Number 48. I have no difficulty finding neighborhoods where people approve of our household. Number 49. My children are given texts and classes which implicitly support our kind of family unit. and do not turn them against my choice of domestic partnership. Number 50, I will feel welcomed and quote-unquote normal in the usual walks of public life, institutional and social. So again, you're walking down the street, maybe you're going to the farmer's market, you're going to the mall, you're going to a movie. Are you probably likely to see more people who look like you? If so, again, that's a function of privilege. And privilege doesn't mean you're a terrible human being and everyone hates you, everyone's blaming you. It's not really even about you. It's just like a function of shared reality. It's a truth that cannot be ignored. Okay, it can't. And, you know, the truth can be bent and twisted and manipulated. The truth can be delivered to favor a certain fact or not to favor a certain fact for that matter, or a certain set of circumstances or collective mutual truths, right? But reality can't be changed. It can't be made differently because of how you describe it. It can't, shared reality, truth, fact, cannot be changed because you're not comfortable with it. I get that. I know that it's very tough for somebody who maybe hasn't been made to feel discomfort like this before to sit with that. But sitting with discomfort is step number 1 on the path to change. And so I would like to invite you to sit with your discomfort. I promise I'll be there with you. I will be with you on that journey. But please sit with your discomfort. And please, if you would like to view this wonderful piece by Peggy McIntosh and just sort of take the quiz, if you will, for yourself, I would invite you to do that. I will, at a later point, probably today, be including a link in the drop-down menu of this episode to where you can find the piece by Peggy McIntosh. Again, white privilege, unpacking the invisible knapsack. And folks, it's an invisible knapsack that's on each of our backs. And I'm going to tell you something that not everybody else has probably clued you into. Okay? You are a victim of racism. Even if you're white, you are a victim of racism. No, I'm not talking about racism against white people, which, isn't a thing. Because white really, it kind of isn't a race, is it? Or really an ethnicity? It's not. Because it's sort of been the gold standard, historically speaking, in modern history. So it's really not a race. And you're not a minority, you're not oppressed, you haven't been suppressed, you haven't had your voices suppressed, you haven't been slaves, you haven't actually experienced being a minority, so racism really doesn't go both ways in that regard. However, you, as a white person, are actually a victim of racism toward black and brown people. You, as a cis, as a hetero person, maybe as a man, are a victim of misogyny. We're all in this together. We really are. You don't have to believe me. You can go ahead and pretend that that's not the case. I mean, that's on you. Unfortunately, you're the one who has to sit with that. You're the one whose soul will end up being damaged by that, but that's on you. I can't make that decision for you, and if you want to choose to be that person, you can, for as much good as it will do you. But you, I think, have been done a huge disservice as well. You haven't been taught the facts of life about history. You haven't been taught how the world works. You've literally only been given a very myopic viewpoint. You haven't actually learned half of the things you probably need to learn to be a better empathetic and compassionate human being. You have had a huge disservice done to you. And, our systems, our societal systems are just that. They're systems of oppression. It's not, again, like Peggy McIntosh touches on in her article, in her paper, I should say. It's not just Black and brown people who have been done this disservice. It's white people as well. And there are many different facets to racism. It's not just a one-on-one, I call you the N-word, I'm racist, and that's what racism is. That's not really sort of the spirit of racism, if you will. The spirit of racism is that it comes from well-meaning, otherwise goodly people. It's an overarching system, and it affects white people differently, but just as much, maybe not with as dire consequences, and definitely differently, but just as much as it affects Black and brown people. So please do yourself a favor. Serve yourself. Serve your spirit. Serve your mind. Serve who you are as a person, and serve your loved ones by learning about systemic racism and how it's influenced your life and the life of people you love, and how it continues to do that, right? It's influencing you, even if you're not going around calling people the N-word or sniggering and laughing whenever someone who looks different than you walks into your line of sight. Like, it's still affecting you, and unfortunately, you're still benefiting from it. A lot of us benefit from these systems, I should say, of oppression that, if we really want, we can pretend that they don't exist, we can ignore it, we can sweep it under the rug, but ultimately, we're benefiting from it. Unfortunately, because we are benefiting from it, we're helping to support it and prop it up. And it doesn't mean we're terrible people, right? It doesn't mean we're all horrible people. And I'm with you on that, because I benefit from these systems too. I suffer from them as well, but I also benefit from them at times. But if we're to live our lives to the fullest, be the best people we can be, we've got to not only recognize that this is happening, but do what we can to change that. Not just for people of colors other than ours, but for ourselves and for our own families and our own peace of mind and the people we love, no matter what color they may be. Although it is next level important to learn about this and to start counteracting it if you love a Black person or a brown person or a person of another ethnicity or race. That's very important. Well, folks, thanks for listening in. That's going to do it. I do appreciate each and every one of you, and I want you to go out there, be thoughtful, be kind, live life the best way you know how, and be well.